And finally, a little game that I finished called The Legend of Grimrock. This is, so I mentioned that after Wizardry 8, I've been on a bit of a Blobber fever. Blobbers, for those who don't remember, are party-based first-person RPGs. Very often they are dungeon crawlers. Oftentimes tile-based, not always, but that's the idea. Specifically party-based first-person. That's like in those party-based first-person RPGs. That's like the core of what that means. And I was looking around for anything that was even kind of like, okay, Wizardry 8 has like fucked me up for life because I'm going to go forever being like, damn, I just wish there was another game with that combat system. I just wish there was another game that played like this. And I'm never going to get it again. I know I'm not. The Legend of Grimrock is a Blobber from 2011 to 2012, I think. That is a much more traditional fantasy, kind of dark medieval fantasy type. It is a dungeon crawler. And I remember, at the time it released, it was a bit of a throwback. It's not a genre that gets too many entries. It's not one that has too many big, loud champions for it on the internet, the same way that, say, boomer shooters might. But I liked this game. This game is cool. It's got, again, some aspects that could be a little polarizing for people. I think the most important thing is the combat system. So essentially, you form a party of up to 4 characters who are all these prisoners who are thrown into this gigantic prison, this dungeon that is within a big mountain called Grimrock. There's no way out. So all you can do is venture down in the hopes of maybe finding maybe an underground passage that escapes it or something. So you're going down and down and down and down. I think there's like 13 different levels. And each level has different puzzles and traps and enemies and stuff and items to find. You pick up torches with limited durations. You gotta keep your characters fed. You create a party of up to 4 characters. I don't know if there's any reason besides self-imposed difficulty why you'd want to take less than 4, because I don't think the game really penalizes you by like splitting experience. But that's the setup. So it's a tile-based, really grid-based movement where you're going one square at a time in first person through this dungeon. It has a very minimal UI. At the bottom right corner is the portraits for all of your characters, and then underneath them is the health and stamina / like mana bar, and the little squares below the portraits for what their left and right hands are carrying. So I was a little confused about how the combat works because the game never actually explains it to you. I think that's kind of a failure of the game. It has a tutorial, like a tutorial slideshow that you can click on in the menu, and it never tells you how the combat works. It's really weird. You just have to figure it out on your own because it's really unique. Essentially, what you do is that all of the combat takes place in real time. When you want to attack with a weapon, let's say you have a fighter who's equipped with a sword. You have to right-click on the sword that's below their portrait. So you have to right-click on the item that your character is holding that you want to use, and then they will swing the sword. And there's a little bit of a cooldown time that kind of think varies with like probably speed or dexterity. Dexterity is the stat. So something like that. Different weapons, I think, have different cooldown periods. I'm sure it's a variety of factors. That's how it works. So at first, this was a very weird system because you are doing a bunch of semi-precision clicking in real time, trying to manage all of your character's cooldowns and consistently attack with them. I've seen people who hate this combat system and they find it very awkward. I see where they're coming from, personally, I don't know if I'd say I love it, but I definitely acclimated to it. And I think it has something, there is a cool aspect to it. I'll admit that. So, for instance, I think the most interesting part of the combat is that is the way that magic works. So there's only 3 classes in the game. It's a very pared down, very, I would say, small scale example of this genre. There's only 3 classes. There's like 4 races. And the classes are fighter, mage, and rogue, or like thief or something. It's that kind of a class, right? Mages are the only ones with access to spells. The way that mages work is that once you have them equipped with a staff or a wand or some kind of magical casting implement, you right-click on their staff, right? And the way you cast spells is that their whole portrait, the whole square, turns into like a keyboard of runes, a set of runes, and then you have to select different runes. It's like It's like a 3x3 grid. You select different runes and then click on a little icon on the right to cast a spell corresponding to those runes. And you pick up scrolls that tell you what combinations do what spells. And then your level in various magical spell schools dictates what spells you're able to, like the level of spells you're able to cast. It's like air, fire, earth, and water, I think, or ice. Yeah. So that's really weird. And at first it's kind of intimidating. They start you out simple. It's like, do the top right one, or the top left rune. That does your fire burst attack. It's like a fireball that just hits directly in front of you. And then it's like, okay, top left, top right, middle right casts like a moving fireball. Bottom left, bottom right casts a field of ice spikes that extends in front of you like 3 or 4 tiles. And it's stressful, but it's very analog in a way that I think is cool. Like you have to actually take time. Spells are really strong in this game, but there is a cast time to them that is input based. It is an actual mechanical test of like how fast you can put in the spell and if you can remember them on the fly without having to reference them in the scroll that you're carrying. Because that's the only place where it'll be recorded. So you're in these fights, and I'm managing like I had 2 fighters, a mage and a thief. I'm swinging with my fighters. I'm throwing objects with my thief. And then as my mage is coming off cooldown, I'm like, oh shit, and I have to plug in the proper combination for them to do this big, strong magical attack. And I don't know, there's something really cool about feeling like you are actively casting a magic spell that takes you a second to fully recite or dial in. And then you get some kind of reward for it. And then you fuck up the sequence, and the spell fizzles because you didn't put in a valid one. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. The combat against stronger enemies sort of devolves into this pattern where you go up to them, you hit them with 1 or 2 characters, and then you strafe around them because enemies can only attack in one direction. So you just sort of strafe into their blind spots and then just do it again. There's a lot of enemies whose AI will behave in this way where you hit them, you strafe to the right, they move to the right to follow you, and then you hit them as they're still getting into position, and then you strafe to the left, and you just do that over and over again. Some people might find that a little bit boring, and the combat might be a little bit rote, especially near the end of the game where they start throwing, Christ, like so many high health enemies at you in a room or in one level. There's also a couple rooms that I audibly out loud said to myself, this room sucks. And that's kind of part of the genre, right? Like there are some puzzles that I just would not have figured out if I didn't look up a guide because they were not intuitive to me personally. And they were just like, hey, here's a new concept. It's that kind of game. It's that kind of game. That's something I've sort of just accepted with the genre. You might find that annoying. It's also like a fairly... How long is this game? I feel like I put... 23 hours. Yeah. Yeah, 20... It's like a solidly long game that I got a little tired near the end just because... I'm glad that it ended when it did because the final couple levels are very long and... Yeah, just kind of got a bit of fatigue. The ending's fine. The ending's kind of neat. It turns out that like the final boss is very funny because it's easily the most dangerous thing in the game, but I don't even want to spoil it, but the way that it's dangerous is sort of hilarious and very specific to the way that the game's movement works. Legend of Grimrock. I give it a thumbs up. I would recommend, I would say it's a pretty cool game. I know there's a sequel. I haven't played the sequel yet. I would be interested in checking that out as well.